Winter has a way of exposing weaknesses that look invisible on paper. It strips away marketing promises, engineering confidence, and press release optimism until only reality remains. In late 2022, a long-distance passenger train crossing the northern United States became an unplanned test of that reality, played out in sub-zero darkness with hundreds of lives on board. What followed was not a single mechanical failure, but a chain of decisions, assumptions, and design choices that collided with the harshest conditions railroads face. The story stretches years earlier and raises questions that still linger long after the snow melted. 17 hours trapped in a blizzard with temperatures dropping near -20 degrees outside does not leave much room for error. 3 locomotives, each costing around $7 million, and delivered fresh from the factory, sat powerless in the snow. The only reason heat and electricity remained on board was a locomotive built a quarter-century earlier, a machine that was supposed to be retired and forgotten. This happened in rural Minnesota on December 20th, 2022, and it revealed the consequences of an $850 million bet that had gone wrong long before the storm arrived. To understand how it reached that point, the timeline has to rewind to December 2018. Amtrak committed $850 million to Siemens Mobility for 125 new ALC-42 Charger locomotives. These units were meant to replace the aging P42 Genesis fleet that had been hauling long-distance trains since the mid-1990s. On paper, the Chargers promised modern systems, better efficiency, and a new era for Amtrak's longest routes. The first delivery arrived in June 2021, and by February 2022, the locomotives were placed into service on the Empire Builder, a route stretching from Chicago to Seattle and Portland through some of the coldest rail territory on the continent. What Amtrak later acknowledged was critical: these locomotives had never been tested in true winter conditions that mirrored the Empire Builder's environment. There was no facility capable of simulating days of sustained sub-zero temperatures, dry blowing snow, and brutal wind chill across open plains and mountain passes. Instead of extended, isolated testing, the decision was made to put the new locomotives directly into service with paying passengers. February 8th, 2022, was meant to be a celebratory launch. Cameras filled Chicago Union Station as the Chargers prepared to depart on their first high-profile run. Engineers attempted to start the positive train control system, a mandatory safety network that must function before departure. It refused to initialize. More than an hour passed as crews worked through the issue with no success. Eventually, a P42 Genesis locomotive built in 1997 was brought in to lead the train. The brand new Chargers left Chicago following behind a machine nearly 25 years older. 4 days later, the eastbound Empire Builder departed Seattle. The same positive train control problems appeared again near Sultan, Washington. During that trip, the train struck a pickup truck at a crossing, adding further delay. It arrived more than 6 hours late. 2 runs, 2 separate failures, and yet the Chargers remained in service. The real test arrived in December 2022 as forecasts showed temperatures plunging across the northern plains. North Dakota and Montana faced lows approaching -30 degrees, with wind chills near -46. In those conditions, exposed skin can suffer frostbite in under a minute. Freight railroads began implementing emergency procedures. BNSF Railway adjusted operations to account for equipment limitations and crew safety. On December 17th, Train 7 departed Chicago with 3 Charger locomotives on the front and 1 P42 Genesis trailing behind. By the following day, the train was already running 2 hours late. At least 1 Charger failed while crossing the Continental Divide. On December 19th, it reached Sandpoint, Idaho, 7 hours behind schedule. Water lines in the dining car froze, shutting down food service. Without a functioning kitchen, emergency beef stew was served instead. Passengers in sleeper accommodations who had paid over $1,000 received the same meal as those in coach. By the time the train reached Spokane, it was 6 hours late. Snow had entered the locomotive cooling compartment, something Siemens later claimed was not a problem. Despite those assurances, the locomotives continued to fail. The situation deteriorated further the next day. On December 20th, Train 8 departed Seattle heading east with 3 Chargers up front and a P42 trailing. The train made it through Washington and Idaho without major issues. As it crossed into Montana, temperatures dropped sharply. Somewhere in rural Minnesota, all 3 Chargers shut down at the same time. The transformer oil system froze, thickening to the point where it could no longer circulate. Without head-end power, lights and heat inside the train went dark. Without traction power, the train could not move. 3 locomotives worth millions sat frozen and silent in the snow. The trailing P42 Genesis continued running normally, providing electricity and heat to the cars. That older locomotive kept passengers safe through the night. Without it, the situation could have escalated into something far more dangerous. BNSF eventually dispatched a freight locomotive to assist. Hours passed before the train could limp its way into Chicago on December 21st, arriving 17 hours behind schedule. Passengers were furious. Amtrak cited mechanical problems and severe weather. No meaningful apology accompanied the explanation. The following day, service west of Minneapolis was suspended for more than a week. Holiday travel plans collapsed across the route. What made the situation harder to accept was what came next. Siemens had already built and delivered more than 70 Charger locomotives for state-supported routes in California, Washington, Illinois, and elsewhere before the long-distance ALC-42 version ever entered service. Those SC-44 units had been operating since 2017 without widespread failures. The difference lay in the modifications made for long-distance service. Larger fuel tanks, more powerful head-end power generators, and an extended nose were added to meet Amtrak's needs. Those changes introduced problems that testing never uncovered. Investigations revealed multiple failure points. Transformer oil piping could not tolerate extreme cold, causing oil to thicken and stall the system. Siemens was forced to redesign the entire oil circuit. Dynamic brake filters allowed fine, dry snow to enter, leading to electrical faults and automatic shutdowns. A spokesperson from the Federal Railroad Administration stated that Siemens did not anticipate this type of Midwest snow, a remarkable admission for equipment built to operate on northern routes. Positive train control systems struggled to reliably communicate with freight railroad infrastructure. Diesel exhaust fluid froze quickly, and when that system failed, the locomotive could shut down entirely. Exterior emergency cutoff switches were triggered by snow and ice, stopping the train without warning. Engineers reported misaligned headlights, number boards shining directly onto control screens, and frozen toilets due to unheated bathrooms. One engineer described the locomotives as pleasant to operate when they worked, emphasizing that condition carefully. Some failures defied basic expectations. Emergency switches activated by weather should never have passed design review. Exhaust systems vulnerable to cold contradicted the purpose of the locomotive. Toilets freezing due to lack of heat suggested oversights that went beyond minor adjustments. Reports indicated that Amtrak sent Siemens at least 70 design change requests over the following year. That volume pointed to a deeper mismatch between design assumptions and real-world conditions. Amtrak effectively acknowledged that passenger service had been used as the testing ground. Instead of extended, isolated trials, real people bought tickets and endured repeated failures. Testing had occurred in earlier years. In June 2016, Chargers ran at the Transportation Technology Center in Pueblo, Colorado. In September 2016, they reached speeds of 135 miles per hour on the Northeast Corridor. Additional testing took place in Washington and Oregon in early 2017. None of those tests involved days of continuous operation in -20 or -30-degree temperatures with blowing snow. Germany experiences winter, but the upper Midwest delivers weeks of sustained sub-zero cold combined with powdery snow and dangerous wind chill. The Federal Railroad Administration was direct in its assessment. Siemens did not anticipate the conditions they would encounter. By February 2024, 2 years after the disastrous debut, Amtrak reported improvement. Failures had dropped by roughly 75%. Reliability exceeded that of the aging P42 fleet. 52 locomotives had been delivered, with 46 in active service across 9 long-distance routes. Yet problems remained. Diesel exhaust fluid continued to freeze. Emergency cutoff switches still activated unexpectedly. Toilets still froze in extreme cold. Despite these issues, Amtrak committed to accepting all 125 locomotives. These machines are expected to operate for 30 to 40 years. Whether they will fully earn the trust placed in them remains uncertain. The P42 Genesis fleet, built in the 1990s, earned its reputation through decades of consistent service. On December 20th, 2022, one of those aging locomotives kept hundreds of passengers warm and safe while 3 brand new Chargers sat immobilized in the snow. Even now, some engineers quietly say they would rather have the old machines at the front. And that's a wrap for today. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss what's next. Thanks for watching, and while you're here, check out one of the other videos on your screen. There's plenty more waiting for you.